There's an eerie sort of quiet that trails you into your grown-up years. It's not the quiet of calm, it's the quiet of something absent, something you can't quite pinpoint. It's there when you sit with people but feel like you're somewhere else completely. It's there when you succeed and don't feel a thing, when you fail and feel it all. That quiet is the echo of a childhood you never truly had. See, most people think childhood is something you outgrow. But in truth, it's something you carry forever. It doesn't fade when you hit 18. It simply lurks behind your habits, your fears, your reactions. It lives quietly in the way you cling to people, the way you dodge conflict, the way you pursue perfection, and the way you feel unworthy of rest. The truth is your lost childhood doesn't just disappear. It becomes the core of your pain. When you were small, you didn't just pick up words or numbers or how to lace your shoes. You learned who you had to be to stay safe. You learned what kind of love was permitted. You learned how much of yourself could show without being pushed away. And depending on what your early world was like, you either learned that your feelings were okay, or that they were too big, that your needs counted, or that they were a weight. And when you learned the second option, something in you began to quietly fade. Maybe you were the dependable one, the kid who looked after everyone else and got praised for being so grown up. Maybe you were the silent one who learned that staying out of sight was safer than being misread. Maybe you were the clown, the one who kept people smiling because it was easier than watching them fight. Whoever you turned into, it wasn't by chance, it was survival. It was your way of saying, if I can't be loved as I am, then I'll turn into what I must be. But the price of that shift was your real self. You learned to bury parts of yourself so deeply that even you forgot they existed. And as you grew older, those buried pieces didn't die. They just waited like sealed letters sent to the person you once were. This is why so many grown-ups feel constantly anxious, alone, or cut off, even when their lives look good from the outside. Because the human mind doesn't gauge fulfillment by wins or safety. It gauges it by completeness, by how matched your current self is with the child who once dreamed without limits. When you lose contact with that child, you don't just lose innocence, you lose the knack for wonder. You lose the skill to play, to rest, to pardon yourself. You start living only for output, working harder, gaining more, endlessly proving you're enough. But the hurt never goes because what you're chasing now is the love you never got back then. Psychologists have explored this for years. Studies in mental psychology and attachment theory prove that the emotional climate you grow up in actually molds your nervous system. If you were raised in a place where warmth was spotty or feelings were dismissed, your brain trained itself to expect rejection and to dull pain. This is called adaptation. It lets you endure childhood, but it quietly harms adulthood because the habits that shielded you as a kid, dodging, flawlessness, overanalyzing, turn into cages when you're older. You learn to bottle feelings, and suddenly you can't sense joy. You learn to overperform, and suddenly downtime feels like shame. You learn to give, and suddenly every bond feels like draining. The same barriers that once guarded you now block you from love, imagination, and calm. But here's what most folks miss. Your lost childhood isn't just bad recollections or skipped moments. It means emotional halts, instances where your growth stalled, instances where you didn't get to voice something, and so it stayed trapped inside you unresolved. And when feelings stay unresolved, they don't vanish, they loop. They resurface in your triggers, in your dreads, in the way you react to minor things that feel larger than they should. That's why a minor snub hurts so deep. It's not just today's snub. It's every time you felt unwanted as a kid, amplified and revived. That's why a minor critique can feel crushing. It's not just the words. It's the echo of every time you were made to feel not enough. The body recalls what the mind tries to erase. Every grown-up who battles worry or void isn't flawed. They're incomplete. They're trying to finish a tale that was cut short. That's why you might feel like no matter how much you gain, it never satisfies, because the aim was never to become more. It was to recall who you were before the world said to be less. Some folks try to stuff that lost gap with output. Some use connections, some use escapes, endless swiping, constant sound, a restless brain, but nothing lasts because you can't outrun void. You have to meet it. You have to ask the child inside you what they craved that they never got. And that query can shift everything. Maybe what they craved wasn't extravagance or ease. Maybe they needed to be noticed, to be heard, to be allowed to weep without being told to quit, to be loved without strings, to be shown that it's fine to err and still be worthy of love. And until you grant yourself those things now, the child in you will keep hunting for them in others. You spot this cycle everywhere, in the people who dread desertion but shove others away first, in the ones who yearn for warmth but act cold, in the ones who chase winds but feel hollow even after getting them, because the lost childhood doesn't fade when you mature. It simply dons adult attire. It learns to seem functional while quietly yearning for something it can't label. And maybe you sensed it, that instant when you grasp your responses don't fit your years, when a minor letdown shatters you, when someone's quiet feels intolerable, when calm feels alien. That's not childish. That's unhealed recall. That's your inner child still awaiting resolution. You don't have to buy into any woo idea for this to click. Brain science backs it. When a kid faces emotional neglect or tension, their brain's alarm system gets too touchy. It stays vigilant, bracing for threat, hunting for loss, and when that kid matures, the body keeps reacting as if threat is still there, even when life is secure. That's why recovery often feels baffling, because you're not battling the now. You're calming the then, but here's the twist. The more you try to flee your lost childhood, the stronger it trails. The more you bury it, the more it molds you without knowing, and the only path out is in. To stop dodging the quiet and instead hear what it's been saying all along. It's not too late to link up. The child inside you isn't lost. They're just covered under piles of duty, pressure, and self-criticism. Every time you laugh openly, rest without shame, or pardon yourself, they rise nearer to the top. Every time you pick kindness over blame, you grant that child a say again. You can begin tiny. You can pen a note to the person you once were. You can view old pictures and not critique the face staring back. You can let yourself feel sorrow without naming it frailty, because every move of self-mercy is a call for that child to return home. You see, recovery isn't about erasing your past. It's about regaining your right to feel. It's grasping that the love you kept awaiting, the approval, the nurture, the security can be supplied by you now. That's not greed, that's growth in its purest shape. The instant your grown self turns into the guardian you always craved, and when you start doing that, something wondrous occurs. You stop existing like a fighter and start existing like a joiner. You stop hunting praise and start hunting calm. You stop needing folks to grasp your hurt, because you finally grasp it yourself. The lost childhood doesn't mark you forever, but it will keep murmuring until you heed. And when you finally do, you'll see that your pain was never a penalty. It was a signal saying you've been fleeing too far from base. It's time to come back. When you finally quit fleeing from your past, something surprising happens. At first, it's not ease, it's sorrow. You begin to spot all the instants you skipped, not because you chose to, but because life forced you to mature before you were set. You start to feel grief for the birthdays you can't recall, the times you wanted to talk but couldn't, the tiny moments when joy was swapped by obligation. And this sorrow is holy because for the first time, you're not ditching your younger self, you're staying with them. Healing your lost childhood isn't about redrawing your recollections. It's about giving them meaning. It's about seeing that what you viewed as flaw was really adjustment, that the tears you held back were acts of bravery, that the person you turned into, even with all the marks, did precisely what they had to do to endure. Most folks dodge this kind of thinking because it feels too raw. But pain isn't the foe here. Pain is the evidence that you're finally sensing what needed to be sensed long ago. And once it's recognized, it starts to ease, because feelings don't vanish when you push them. They melt when they're grasped. There's an idea in psychology called reparenting. It means learning to give yourself the care you never got. It doesn't mean faulting your parents or redrawing the past. It means knowing that you hold the power now to provide what was absent then. When you practice reparenting, you begin to speak to yourself differently. Instead of asking, "What's broken in me?" you begin asking, "Of course, I feel this way. That fits." Instead of forcing flawlessness, you give patience. Instead of dulling your feelings, you learn to hear them like you would hear a frightened kid who just needs holding. That's how true recovery starts, not with criticism, but with allowance. Allowance to rest, allowance to feel, allowance to be without proving it, and slowly that allowance turns into calm. It's odd how in grown-up years we forget that safety is something we can make. You can craft it in the way you talk to yourself, in the way you draw lines, in the way you quit justifying your hurt to folks who won't get it. Safety doesn't always mean ease. Sometimes it means dropping what's known but toxic. Sometimes it means standing solo until you find the you who can stand without dread. Many mix up recovery with mending, but you are not a task to be finished. You are a plot to be cared for. Some seasons are for growth, others for pause. Some days you flower, some days you drop. That's not backslide, that's cycle, and the more you respect that cycle, the more you start feeling vital again. Have you ever seen that kids hold this easy wonder about all? They don't mask their thrill, they don't sorry for being wowed, they spot magic in the plainest stuff. A cloud, a puddle, a noise. That's what you drop when you drop your childhood. You stop being wowed. All turns normal, reasoned, weighed, but when you link again with your inner kid, even a bit, life starts to feel rich again. Colors look sharper, tunes hit harder. You start to catch how light spills through branches, how your top track still squeezes your chest. That's not longing, that's recall. It's your spirit saying, "I recall what whole felt like." There's a soft strength in letting yourself play once more, not to wow, not to act, but to just be in joy. Play doesn't mean childish, it means receptive, and the more receptive you get, the less your pain mocks you, because pain thrives on hiding, not on seeing. When you shine light on what's buried, it loses hold. In fact, most of your grown struggles aren't fresh. They're old cuts with new masks. The dread of flop is the dread of letting someone down. The dread of brush off is the dread of being unliked. The push to win is often the urge to show your worth notice. And once you track these loops back to their start, they stop ruling you. You start answering instead of lashing. You start picking instead of looping. One of the deepest instants in recovery is when you see your parents too were kids once. They hauled their own lost childhoods, their own quiets, their own dreads. They handed down what they had, even if it wasn't plenty, and grasping that doesn't erase the hurt, but it clarifies it. It releases you from the endless query of why wasn't I loved the way I craved. Because sometimes the folks meant to show you love never grasped it themselves. Pardon then isn't about clearing anyone. It's about freeing yourself from lugging their tail. It's about saying, "I don't need to echo this cycle." You can respect what occurred without letting it shape who you turn into. And that decision, that soft rejection to take on the same emotional quiet is what stops family pain, Still, there's something deeply real about yearning for what was gone. You might scan old photos and feel like you're gazing at a stranger. You might ponder where that sparkly, wondering kid went, the one who thought all was doable, but they're still there, waiting behind your doubt, your weariness, your guarding walls. They're waiting for you to spot them again, and when you finally do, you might weep, not from grief, but from knowing, because you'll grasp that you never really lost them. You just quit searching. Healing your lost childhood isn't a finish line. It's a talk that goes a lifetime. It's in every tiny act of care you give yourself. It's in picking truth over dodging. It's in learning to pause without shame and to love without dread. And over time, the hurt that once owned you becomes a guide. It starts to lead you instead of stalking you. When you start living from that mended place, all shifts quietly but deeply. You stop craving approval because you've learned to approve yourself. You stop pursuing bonds that echo your cuts. You start drawing folks who fit your calm. Your tasks become less about showing worth and more about sharing your real. Even alone time starts to feel gentler because you're no longer alone. You're joined by your full self. There's a lovely fact that often slips by. Recovery doesn't turn you into who you were before the hurt. It turns you into someone fresh, someone who can carry both delight and ache without being ruled by either. Someone who sees that being tender is not a weakness, but a type of insight. Someone who gets that calm isn't the lack of fight, but the skill to stay with it without fleeing. You may never regain the childhood you missed, but you can craft the grown years that kid earned, one packed with softness, imagination, and real. You can laugh boldly without sorry. You can pause without okay. You can say no without dread. You can love without fading. That's how you respect the child you were, by granting them the life they were meant to live. So if you find yourself feeling adrift or hollow, don't hurry to mend it. Stay with it, because hollow isn't missing. It's call. It's the room where your true self is asking to come back, and if you hear closely, you'll catch it. That soft murmur from deep within saying, "I'm still here. I've been waiting for you." From that instant on, recovery becomes less of a trip and more of a meeting. You start to recall how to feel secure in your own skin. You start to rediscover your voice, the one you hushed years ago to keep calm. You start to live with more purpose, more kindness, more patience. You start to view that the world isn't set to harm you anymore. It's waiting for you to join it completely. And maybe one day you'll gaze in the mirror and not just see your image. You'll see all the yous standing as one. The kid who dreamed, the teen who concealed, the grown who held on. All of them finally calm, and in that instant you'll grasp something lovely. The life you were hunting wasn't out there. It was always inside you, waiting for you to return. You'll start to get that pain was never the foe. It was the gate. It guided you back to your real. It peeled away all that wasn't love until only love stayed. And that's the soft prize of recovery. Not flawlessness, not endless joy, but grasping. Grasping that every bit of hurt was leading you here to this quiet, to this mercy, to this meeting with yourself. Because at the close of it all, that's what recovery truly is. Not fleeing the past, but hugging it with open arms, saying to your younger self, "I see you. You did your best. You can rest now. I'll handle from here." And for the first time, quiet feels changed. It's no longer the quiet of lack. It's the quiet of calm, the kind that sings softly between breaths, reminding you that you arrived, that you're full, that your tale, and even with all its hurt, it was never a disaster. It was homecoming.